I just want to start this video out with a disclaimer. I am not in any way, shape, or form a financial advisor. Everything I'm going to tell you is stuff that's worked for me and the people I know, and I'm not guaranteeing anything. I'm just going to give you another way of thinking about things, but I can guarantee you one thing actually, that you will learn something. You might not like what you learn, but you'll learn something from this channel. So that's just my disclaimer for these videos. Do not sue me if it doesn't work for you. I'm putting it out there up front, but just take a look. My name is JQ. Actually, my name is Jaquez, but everybody calls me JQ. And I'm 26 years old. I'm from Portland, Oregon. So that's kind of who I am. So now let's talk about why I'm in front of you today. I know a little something. I did a lot of research. I mean, I went to college, got a degree in business, but none of that really prepared me for life after college. So what I did is I wanted to know what it took to buy a house. I wanted to know what it meant to have good credit, because where I came from, we never talked about that, nor did anybody I know own houses, or, did anybody have good credit. And so I started doing research. So I graduated college, went and got my first apartment. You know how that goes. Crappy apartment, but it's the first. So, I learned some responsibilities. So in that time in the apartment, I started to realize something. I was paying rent every month, but my apartment management company wasn't good. No one ever came and fixed anything, and they just kept raising the rent. And so I was about a year in, and I'm like, I've given them $10,000 this year, and I don't feel like I've gotten $10,000 worth of, living, So I was like, I'm gonna buy a house. So in that moment, I had a car. I just bought a new Camaro at the time. I was like, but I want a house. So I was like, I'll sell the Camaro. So I sold my Camaro, went and got pre-approved for a house. But I didn't know what that meant. Who do I talk to? Where do I turn to? Or any of that nature. So I just started researching. I'm like, well, I want a good deal. I don't want to just get a house because I can get a house. I want actually a good deal in getting a house. So I started working on my credit, paying off some stuff, some credit cards and all that stuff. So I got my credit to like right around the 700, and I got pre-approved FHA. And so they were like, okay, you can do 3.5% down. We'll talk about all that later in this video. But that they just kind of was telling me all that. So I was like, okay. And then I ended up doing a full 180 of that first deal the first pre-approval that I got. So I ended up doing something different. I'll tell you that later also. But this video just to tell you how I got to where I am today. Now, by no means am I where I want to be, but I'm a lot further than where I started. So let's talk about first things first in buying a house. What is a mortgage payment? So a mortgage is what you take out from the bank on a house that you like. So you go out, you find the house you want. It's $300,000. So the bank says, okay, we'll give you $300,000. But we want you to pay us back at this interest rate for this amount of time. And so in doing that, you'll say most people do a 30-year mortgage. So which means you pay, it's just like paying rent, except it's called mortgage. So every month you pay that. So they make a fixed rate every year. At the end of the year, they recalculate it for your next year because your property taxes will go up. We'll talk about that later too. And so in doing that, you make your payments every single month. So month in and month out, you pay the bank. So they gave you a $300,000 loan for the house. So for the next 30 years, you're going to pay them that money back. And on top of paying them back, you pay interest on top of that. And we'll talk about that a little later in the video. But in essence, just what is a mortgage? A mortgage is just what it's called to pay the bank back for that loan you took out for the house. It's as simple as that. Just think about it like rent, except it's going back to the bank for the money you borrowed. So now we're going to talk about down payments on houses. And everything I'm talking about right now is real surface. We'll get deeper later in the videos, but I just want to give you an introduction to kind of, the information. Down payments. A lot of people think you need to put $50,000 down. I don't know where that number came from, but it is absolutely false. You do not need $50,000 to buy a house. Actually, you need a lot less. And I would tell you, if this is your first house, I would tell you not to put $50,000 down as a down payment. And this is why. If you save up all this money, you've been saving for a couple of years, you save your $50,000, you got your credit right, and you're ready to get pre-approved, you find the house of your dreams. No, you don't find the house of your dreams. It's your first house. It's never the house of your dreams. 9 times out of 10, it's not. You get there later in life. So you buy this house and you give them $50,000 cash as a down payment. So in doing that, yes, it's better because your payments will be less each month, but is it really worth the difference in what you would be paying if you put less down? So if you did FHA, it would be 3.5% down. So you got a $300,000 house. You could put $50,000 down, which is more than 3.5%, or you can put a 3.5% down, which would be 3.5 times. So it'd be roughly 11 grandish, depending, it's going to be more with closing costs and all that. But just as a down payment, you do 3,500 per 100,000. So you do, about right around 11 grand, give or take a couple $100 in the down payment portion. There is closing costs in which that pays all the fees in the bank and all that. But that's also on top of it. It's kind of later on the side. But if you put that, so what I'll tell you is that if you do a loan, right? So I'm going to look some stuff up for you really quick. Give me 1 sec. So let's say you put $300,000, you want a $300,000 house. And it's a nice house. It's not your dream house, but it's a nice house. It's better than your current situation, and it would be yours. What you would do is you would say, okay, well, you go to the bank, you say, well, how much can I afford? So then they'll start pulling your credit. They'll look all the bills you have each month, just your credit bill. So your credit card payments, your student loans, card notes, those are the only main bills they care about. They don't care about how much your phone bill is. They don't care about any of that stuff. All they care about is your fixed payments each month that you have to make no matter what. So they'll say, okay, well, you're only paying $200 in fixed payments and you make $5,000 a month. So we'll let you have a $2,600 mortgage. That's not the exact math, but that's how they generate it. Say, okay, well, what does a $2,600 mortgage look like? Oh, you can use $400,000 to buy a house. I also suggest on your first house, you don't use all of the money that they tell you that you can use, and talk about that later also. So you got a $300,000 house. We'll do 3.5% down. And you have an interest about 4.5, which kind of is market right now. So you would be putting $12,000 down on this house, and that's just down payment, not closing costs. And over 30 years, your payment would be about $1,900 a month, give or take, your taxes and insurance and what that cost. So that's $1,900 if you only put $12,000 down. Let's say, okay, you got 50 grand in the bank and you put it all down. So your 50,000 takes you from 1,900 to 1,600. Think about it this way. You just gave the bank $50,000 to save $300 a month. Was it really worth it? Yeah, you pay the house off quicker, but if this isn't your dream home, why are you in a rush to pay off a house that you probably are going to sell? So then you buy the house, you put your $50,000 down, you're on this high horse. Then as soon as you close on it, the very first time you step into that house, you're going to see some problems that you didn't notice when you went through the first walkthrough, because now you own it and it's yours. The problems weren't yours until you actually signed those closing papers. So you walk in, you're like, okay, I need the paint. Paint's not that expensive. You can do it for a couple $100. Then you're like, okay, my dishwasher went out. Well, dishwashers are $600, $700 for just a basic one. You can go up from there, $1,000 dishwasher. Then you say, okay, well, my fridge is kind of dated and it doesn't match my other appliances. A fridge can be $4,000. The upper, nicer refrigerators. So now, let's say you want a fridge and a new dishwasher for $3,000. You just gave them $50,000, and that was your money you saved up. So the $3,000 is going to be pretty tight, especially because now you have to pay this mortgage every month. You were paying rent, but now you're paying a mortgage, and so it's like, okay, well, how am I going to afford to? Where is this $3,000 going to come from if I just gave them all of my money? So I tell you this, I'm not suggesting one way or another. If you want to put the $50,000 down, be my guest. I'm just telling you, especially if this is your first house, you're younger, life happens, you don't know what the market's going to do in your area. I'm saying I wouldn't put $50,000 down unless that first house. No way. So let's see. Another part of that payment I was telling you about, so the $1,600 and $1,900, depending on which way you went, that would include taxes and insurance. So people have this idea that 30 years mortgages, once you pay it off, you own the house outright and you never make another payment. It's true and it's false. As long as you own your property, you pay property taxes and they don't go anywhere. You pay them forever. So you can pay the entire house off and you still pay property taxes every single year. Depending on what state you live in, depends on the rate and all that kind of stuff and how much you're paying. But every single year until you do something with that house, you owe property taxes on it. And insurance is you're pretty much insuring your property. So you say, okay, you can get hurricane, flood, water damage, whatever. So if something happens to your house, you pay your deductible. And then from that, you actually, the insurance company will come in and they'll fix everything and pay for it to get done. And those are two things that you have to have when you get a mortgage through the traditional way. And so from there, we talk about buying versus renting. Let me tell you this now. Buying a house isn't for everyone, but I'm going to tell you why it's for more people than they think it is. So when you rent it, for me, I'll use myself an example. I rented a 2-bedroom apartment, was okay, was nothing special, no terrace, no anything. It was just a traditional first 2-bedroom apartment out of college. And when I started, it was like $800 a month, and then on the second year they tried to raise it to $1,300 a month. But I was already moving out at the time. They weren't fixing stuff, so I didn't care. They could have raised it to whatever they wanted to because I wasn't staying. I was going to buy the house. And so in 2 years, I roughly gave them, roughly gave them $25,000 in rent. So I also gave them, when I moved in, you have to give them $1,000 security deposit for cleaning and all that. So when I moved out, they charged me for the smallest stuff. They charged me $50 a blind to clean them. I had 4 blinds in my house, so they charged me $200 to clean floor blinds. And these blinds weren't broken. There was nothing wrong with them. They were maybe had some dust on them that they didn't like, and they charged me $50 a blind. So that $200 cut into my $1,000 I gave them. So after everything was said and done, they gave me back $175. I gave them $25,000, and they gave me a check for $175 when I moved out and said, "Have a good day." At that moment, I knew I was never going back. I got a degree in business, and I thought about it. What was my return on investment in putting $25,000 into somebody else's apartment that I have no ownership of? The values could have went through the roof, and that would have done nothing for me but probably raise the rent. So at that moment, I just knew I wasn't going back if it was in my power. So once I bought my house, I've never looked back, and I don't intend to. So that's why I say, and so in buying the house so that's renting. So renting, but renting's good because you get to live where you want to live for a year. You can move around. I mean, buying a house, you can do it. It's a little bit more difficult with the paperwork, but renting, you can kind of, live wherever, and, you don't have no obligation outside of your lease. And buying is a little bit more long term, and, so that's the difference there. But for me, buying kind of leads us into the next point, which is generational wealth. I say I bought the house because I'm thinking long term. So a lot of people want to buy a house for their own reasons, but for me, it was long term. And what does that mean? So growing up, I never inherited anything, never got property, never anything of that nature. So I didn't know what it meant to, start out with a hand up. I pretty much was like, okay, well, what would it look like if I wanted my generations to come? What would it look like for me to leave them something? So I was like, okay, well, let's look into buying a house. So when I bought the house, I signed all the paperwork, and it kicked in when I made that first mortgage payment. Like, okay, this is really mine. But then it was like, okay, I start thinking bigger than myself. And I said, okay, well, this is mine, but this is for everyone to come from my lineage and, from here out, And so I was like, it just kind of made more sense. I'm like, okay, well, if I'm going to pay on something, I have to live. You have to live somewhere. So you have to pay rent or you have to pay a mortgage. So it's like, if I'm going to live somewhere and I need somewhere to live for the next 30 years, why would I not invest it into myself, into my future also, and the successors after me, instead of putting it into somebody else's pocket? So when I started thinking like that, it's like, okay, it makes sense. So is this my forever home? No. But what buying a house does, it helps you build wealth. So let's say you buy a house for $200,000 and the market's going crazy. So and the market goes up. The market's going crazy everywhere across the country, but Portland, it's pretty ridiculous right now. It's slowing down actually at this moment, but it's still ridiculous. The median home is over $400,000. That's a whole nother topic. But in saying all this, I say you buy a house for $200,000, the market takes off. In 3 years, your house is worth $270,000 hypothetically. All hypotheticals. I'm not saying any market is really going to do this, but this is a possibility. So now your house is worth $270,000. So you're like, okay, I've had the house 3 years. I paid all my mortgage payments, I want to take a vacation. I want to buy another property. I want to go get a villa, whatever it is you want. You can say, well, I got $70,000 in equity, so the bank will let me take out $60,000 on the equity line. Maybe you want to remodel the whole house, or maybe you want to do something. Maybe you just want to go on a family vacation or whatever. So you can take out any amount of that equity as a loan against the house, which we'll talk about how that works in later videos. But, where else are you going to get access to $50,000 that technically belongs to you? Because if you sell the house and don't do the equity pool, you make that money in cash. So you could say in 3 years, you can say, I had a good run. I don't want this house anymore. I want to buy something different. You can sell it, make your 70 grand, probably 40 or 50 after you pay, the realtors and all the fees and all that, and pay your taxes on it also. And I got some other stories about that later. Remind me. But in saying all that, I'm saying, so you take that money and go buy your second house, your new house. So now you got $60,000 in profit that you made. Had you rented that same house, you would have got your security deposit back if you're lucky, which was $1,500. So you weigh your odds. So and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying every market is going to go up, but I am going to tell you, no matter what, the rent's going up every year. So even when the market is down and properties are really, really plummeting, the values are plummeting, the rent's still going up because it's harder to buy houses. So now everybody who owns houses and rents them out in apartments, they have a control on the market because everybody who needs these properties, they can't go get a loan from the bank. The bank's not giving any loans, so they need to go find places. So it's harder to get rental properties, which it happens everywhere. And so let's say you buy a house for $200,000 and it does the opposite and it tanks. The market plummets. So now your house is worth $160,000. As long as you sustain your job or your income and you can afford the monthly payments, all you have to do is ride the storm out. So let's say the market's down for 5 years, but you needed somewhere to live for 5 years anyway. So instead of going to an apartment where they can keep raising the rent, you just keep paying your same mortgage payment for 5 years. Then the market turns around and now you're back above your break-even point. Now you're starting to see some equity built into the house. So that's the difference. That's why I say I bought, and that's why I think other people should buy, but I'm not telling you it's for you. It's situational. Some people don't want to be fixated to a property or a place or anywhere for a certain amount of time, and they just want to have the flexibility. That's fine. I'm just saying, if you're thinking long term and return on your investments and generational wealth, and starting the trend that didn't get started for you, I'm saying I bought. So that's my take on that. I don't want to get in deep in any of these topics. All of these are going to come later, but this was just an intro, like a basics to everything, and kind of and I also talk about on the channel what it means to get credit to be able to buy a house. But this is just a mortgage aspect for you. Like if you didn't know what it was, if you did know, if you had some idea, this video is just going to kind of help you get a bigger picture of, what I'm talking about. So if you like it, please thumbs up, leave me some comments, tell me what you want to know. I don't know everything, so let me put that out there. I'm not by no means saying I know everything, but I know a lot. I know a little about a lot of stuff, I should say. So taxes and paying insurance and buying a house and mortgages and building your credit, I know a little about it, enough to get you to where you need to be. You don't need a huge credit. You don't need an 800 credit score to buy a house, and you don't need 50,000. So let's get that out your hair right now. Just work on building your credit right now, and wait till the next video, and I'll give you some more tips and stuff on how to get there. And I'll actually show you step by step some ways that you can actually start building credit today and be ready to buy a house sooner than you think. And that's that, folks.